Okay, so have you ever, like, gotten ready for a big presentation and it's, like, all in English?
Oh, yeah.
Or, like, maybe landed in a country where you have to use English? It's
Yeah.
like every conversation is like this high-stakes test.
I can imagine.
It's a lot of pressure.
Totally.
You sent us some material about practicing English
Mm.
all by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually a YouTube video, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Classic.
We've all been there
Yes.
scrolling YouTube late at night,
Uh-huh.
hoping that there's some magic trick to fluency.
Right.
But here's the thing. Practicing by yourself, that's not just some random tip.
No.
It's actually backed by some pretty interesting science.
Yeah, it is. So what's interesting is that it's not just about convenience.
Yeah.
It's actually tapping into some powerful learning principles.
Okay.
So, when you're by yourself, you're free from that fear of judgment.
Right?
You can experiment. You can stumble over words. You can even talk to yourself in a funny accent without worrying about anyone else's reaction. And that freedom allows you to, really focus on the mechanics of speaking, getting those sounds right,
Oh, okay.
on finding your own rhythm in the language.
So it's like a dress rehearsal, but for your brain.
Kind of.
You get to try things out, make mistakes, and build that muscle memory without the pressure of, like, an audience.
Exactly.
I can see how that would be a confidence booster.
Yeah.
But you mentioned science. What's actually happening in our brains when we practice like this?
Well, every time you speak a word or even think a thought in English, you're activating a network of neurons. You're creating these pathways in your brain.
Oh, okay.
The more you repeat those actions, the stronger those pathways become. It's like walking through a forest.
Yeah.
The more you walk a particular path, the more defined and easy it becomes.
Uh-huh.
So with consistent practice, you're essentially carving out a superhighway in your brain for English fluency.
Okay, that makes so much sense.
Right.
It's not just about memorizing vocabulary. It's about literally changing the physical structure of our brains to accommodate this new language.
Yeah.
That's kind of mind-blowing.
It is pretty cool.
But where do we even start? The YouTube video you sent is packed with tips.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can unpack some of those.
Absolutely. Let's start with some techniques that leverage the power of mimicry. You know how musicians often learn by imitating their favorite artists?
Yeah.
The same principle applies to language.
Oh!
By closely observing and replicating the speech patterns of native speakers, you can accelerate your own fluency.
Okay.
One classic technique is called shadowing. Have you ever tried that?
Shadowing. Honestly, that sounds a little intimidating. Is
Uh,
that where you basically, like, follow along with someone speaking
Yeah.
and try to, like, mimic them in real time?
Yeah, that's it.
That sounds like a recipe for, like, a tongue-tied disaster.
I hear you. It can feel a bit overwhelming at first, but think of it like a dance.
Okay.
You're not aiming for perfect synchronization right away.
Uh-huh.
You're learning the steps, the rhythm, the flow. You pick a short audio clip,
Okay.
something from a podcast or a YouTube video, and you listen intently, focusing on the nuances of their pronunciation, their intonation,
Right.
the pauses, even their breathing.
Hold on. Breathing. I never thought about mimicking someone's breathing.
Yeah.
But I guess that contributes to, like, the natural flow of speech.
Totally. It's all those subtle elements that textbooks often miss.
Right.
And then you try to repeat what you hear.
Okay.
Mirroring not just the words, but the way they're said.
Hmm.
Studies have shown that shadowing can significantly improve pronunciation
Wow.
and even help you acquire a more authentic accent.
Okay, now that's the kind of aha moment I was
Yeah.
hoping for.
Yeah.
So it's not just about, like, learning grammar rules and
Yeah.
vocabulary lists.
Yeah.
It's about absorbing these, like, subtle, almost subconscious patterns of how native speakers actually use the language.
Exactly. And there's another technique that taps into this mimicry principle, and it might surprise you. Watching and repeating lines from your favorite English shows or movies.
Wait, seriously? You're telling me my Netflix binging can actually be productive? I'm listening.
Yeah, think about it. Movies and shows are packed with natural, everyday language.
Wait.
The kind of slang and idioms that you won't find in a textbook.
Uh-huh.
And by repeating those lines, you're not just learning new words, you're learning how to use them in context, with the right intonation and emotional weight.
So it's like immersive accidental learning.
Mm-hmm.
You're having fun watching a show,
Mm-hmm.
but your brain is also picking up all these real-world language cues.
Exactly. It's a sneaky way to absorb the natural rhythms and colloquialisms that make your English sound more authentic
Yeah.
and less textbooky,
Right. Yeah.
less robotic.
This is making so much sense.
Yeah.
We were talking about like the power of mimicry,
Mm.
shadowing native speakers, even like stealing lines from our favorite shows.
Mm-hmm.
It's like our brains are like wired to learn language through observation and imitation. But what about when we're like not watching or listening to something in English?
Right.
Are there ways to keep that learning engine running, even in like our everyday lives?
Yeah, that's where the power of internalization comes in.
Okay.
It's about shifting your internal monologue, that voice in your head, into English as much as possible.
Okay.
You might be thinking,
Uh-huh.
wait, talking to myself? Isn't that a sign I've spent way too much time alone?
Okay, that thought definitely crossed my mind.
Yeah.
I'm picturing myself like wandering around the grocery store, muttering to
Right.
myself in English,
Yeah.
and people like giving me the side eye.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing there's a method to the madness?
There is a method, I promise.
Okay.
It's about building that comfort level with thinking in English.
Yeah.
So speaking it out loud feels less like a translation exercise and more like a natural extension of your thoughts.
Right.
Think about athletes, right?
Yeah.
They use self-talk all the time
Uh-huh.
to stay focused, to pump themselves up, to visualize success.
Mm-hmm.
You can apply that same principle to language learning.
So instead of like mentally running through my to-do list
Yeah.
in my native language,
Yeah.
I could try doing it in English.
Yeah.
Or like if I'm cooking dinner, I could narrate the steps to myself in English.
Exactly. It might feel a bit silly at first, but the more you do it, the more natural it becomes.
Okay.
It's about making English a constant presence in your mind, even when you're not actively studying or practicing.
And isn't there something about just labeling things around you in English?
Yes.
Like instead of thinking, like you think table in your head.
That's another great technique.
Okay.
It's called mental labeling.
Uh-huh.
And it's a simple but powerful way to integrate English into your everyday life.
Right.
You're basically training your brain to associate those objects with their English names,
Yeah.
reinforcing those neural connections we were talking about earlier.
Okay, I'm definitely adding that to my arsenal.
Oh.
But let's be honest. Some of the like classic language learning techniques,
Yeah.
they could feel a bit, well, boring.
I agree.
Like reading aloud, for example. I remember my teachers always telling me to do it,
Mm-hmm.
but I never really understood why.
Right.
It felt more like a chore than like an effective learning strategy.
I can see why. But reading aloud isn't just about passively moving your eyes across the page.
Right.
It's about engaging multiple senses at once.
Okay.
You're seeing the words, you're hearing yourself speak them,
Yeah.
and you're also feeling the physical act of pronunciation. That multisensory input helps to cement those words and phrases in your memory.
So it's not just about like input, it's about output as well.
Exactly.
It's about actively producing the sounds,
Yeah.
training your mouth to form those words correctly.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the difference between like passively listening to a song
Right.
and actually singing along.
That's a great analogy.
Right.
Yeah. And reading aloud also forces you to pay attention to things like pronunciation, intonation, and pacing. You can't just skim over words like you might when you're reading silently.
Right.
You have to engage with the language on a deeper level.
It's like a workout for your vocal cords and your brain at the same time.
Yeah, totally.
Now, here's another classic technique that always felt a bit awkward to me.
Okay.
Creating my own conversations.
Yeah.
It's like, who am I talking to? The wall, my pet goldfish.
I know it can feel strange at first, but hear me out.
Okay.
This technique is all about developing spontaneity
Okay.
and flexibility in your speaking.
Uh-huh.
Think about improv comedy.
Right.
Those actors have to think on their feet, come up with witty responses,
Yeah.
and keep the conversation flowing,
Yeah.
all without a script.
Okay. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm giving myself improv training,
Kind of.
but for English conversation.
Yes.
I could choose a scenario like ordering food at a restaurant
Mm-hmm.
and then practice different ways to ask for what I want,
Right.
how to handle special requests,
Yeah.
even how to deal with like a mix-up with my order.
Exactly. And you can get creative with it.
Okay.
You can invent different characters with different personalities and accents. You can practice different levels of formality.
Yeah.
You can even throw in some challenging vocabulary words
Okay.
to test yourself.
This is starting to sound less like an awkward exercise
Yeah.
and more like a fun way to like play with the language.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so we've covered some techniques that tap into like mimicry, internalization, and even a bit of like improv comedy.
Right.
What else do we have in our language learning toolkit?
Well, we can't forget about the classics.
Yeah.
Those tried and true methods that have been helping language learners for generations.
Right, right.
And I know you mentioned tongue twisters earlier, but I think they deserve a bit more attention.
Oh, absolutely, tongue twisters.
Yeah.
They're like the guilty pleasure of language learning.
I agree.
They're fun. They're challenging.
Yeah.
And they make you feel like a kid again.
Yeah, yeah.
But are they like really effective for improving pronunciation?
They absolutely can be.
Okay.
Think of them like targeted exercises for your tongue and your mouth.
Okay.
They force you to pay close attention to specific sounds.
Right.
And to practice those tricky combinations that might trip you up in regular conversation. Speech therapists often use similar exercise to help people improve their articulation.
Okay.
So you're in good company.
So it's like weightlifting for your tongue.
Yes.
You're building those muscle movements and making those sounds more precise and effortless.
Totally. And let's be honest. Who doesn't love a good challenge?
Right.
Try this one. She sells seashells by the seashore. The shells she sells are seashells, I'm sure.
Oh, that's a classic. It gets me every time. But I can already feel my tongue working overtime. Trying to get those like S and sheesh sounds right.
And that's exactly the point. By practicing these tricky phrases, you're training your mouth to produce those sounds accurately and quickly.
Right.
It's like a musician practicing scales.
Okay.
To improve their finger dexterity.
Sure.
The more you practice, the smoother and more effortless your pronunciation becomes.
Okay, I'm convinced tongue twisters are officially back on my practice list.
Yes.
Now, what about language learning apps?
Okay.
They seem to be everywhere these days. Are they worth the hype?
Language learning apps can be incredibly useful tools.
Okay.
Especially for supplementing your solo practice.
Right.
Apps like Duolingo or Babbel offer structured lessons and interactive exercises that can help you build vocabulary and grammar skills.
Right.
And apps like HelloTalk or Tandem connect you with native speakers for conversation practice and language exchange.
It's like having a virtual language partner in your pocket.
Yeah, kind of.
But I can see how relying solely on apps could be limiting.
I agree.
You wouldn't want to miss out on like those real world interactions and those like subtle nuances you can only pick up from genuine conversations.
Totally. Apps are great for building a foundation and providing consistent practice, but they shouldn't be your only source of learning.
Okay.
Think of them as tools to enhance your learning journey.
Right.
Not a replacement for the richness of human interaction and the power of those solo practice techniques we've been discussing.
Right. It's all about finding that balance and using those apps strategically to complement your other efforts.
Exactly.
But here's the thing. We've talked about so many fantastic techniques from like shadowing to tongue twisters to talking to ourselves in the grocery store.
Right.
But how do we actually like put all this into practice?
Yeah.
And more importantly, see real progress.
That's where goal setting comes in. It's the bridge between knowing what to do and actually doing it. And it's the area where many language learners stumble.
Okay.
They have all the tools and techniques,
Yeah.
but they lack the structure and consistency to make real headway.
It's like having a gym membership,
Ew.
but never actually going to the gym.
Right, exactly.
You might have the like best equipment and the fanciest workout clothes.
Yeah.
But if you don't actually show up and put in the work, you're not going to see any results.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your specific goal.
Okay.
You mentioned that you have a big presentation coming up entirely in English.
Yeah.
How can we tailor these techniques to help you prepare for that specific challenge?
Well, for starters, the thought of standing up in front of all those people and speaking in English makes me want to like hide under my desk.
I hear you.
So anything that can boost my confidence would be amazing.
Okay.
And of course, I want to sound fluent and natural.
Yeah.
Not like I'm like reading from a script.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I hear you. Presentations can be nerve-wracking,
Yeah.
even in your native language.
Absolutely.
But we can use these techniques to break down that fear
Okay.
and build your confidence. And remember, this isn't about achieving some mythical level of perfection.
Right.
It's about progress.
Yeah.
It's about feeling comfortable expressing yourself in English. And it's about connecting with your audience authentically.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
I tend to like get caught up in striving for perfection.
Uh-huh.
And then I get, like, paralyzed by the fear of making mistakes.
I get it.
But if I, like, shift my focus to progress and connection,
Right.
that, like, takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
And allows me to actually enjoy the process.
Yeah, exactly. It's about embracing the journey with all its twists and turns and inevitable stumbles.
Right.
Because those stumbles are actually valuable learning opportunities.
Okay, I'm feeling more optimistic already.
Good.
But how do I actually, like, translate all these techniques into, like, a concrete plan for my presentation?
Well, let's start by breaking down your presentation into smaller chunks.
Okay.
What are the key topics you'll be covering?
Okay.
What are the main points you want to convey?
Okay, so my presentation is about topic of presentation.
Okay.
The key topics I'll be covering are list of topics.
Mm-hmm.
And the main points I want to get across are list of main points.
Excellent. Now, let's think about how we can use these techniques to practice each of those sections effectively.
Okay.
Remember, we want to engage multiple subjects, build fluency and spontaneity, and boost your confidence.
Okay, I'm ready to dive in.
Yeah.
What should we tackle first?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got our presentation broken down. We've got our toolkit of techniques.
Yeah.
And we've got our mindset shifted from perfection to progress.
Right.
I'm actually starting to feel excited about this presentation.
Awesome.
Which is a huge win already.
Yes.
But where do we, like, start putting all this into action?
Let's focus on that first section of your presentation.
Okay.
You mentioned it's about topic of first section.
Uh-huh.
How about we use the mirror technique to practice your delivery?
Mirror technique. You mean like actually standing in front of a mirror and talking to myself?
Yes.
That sounds a little terrifying, to be honest.
I know it can feel a bit awkward at first.
Okay.
Trust me on this one.
Okay.
Standing in front of a mirror allows you to see yourself as your audience will see you.
Right.
It's a chance to observe your posture, your facial expressions, your hand gestures, all those nonverbal cues that play a huge role in communication.
Okay. I can see how that would be helpful.
Yeah.
It's like getting an outside perspective on my own presentation style.
Right.
But what should I be looking for exactly?
Pay attention to your posture.
Okay.
Are you standing up straight and projecting confidence? Are your facial expressions engaging and aligned with the message you're conveying?
Right.
Are your hand gestures natural and purposeful?
Yeah.
Or are they distracting?
Oh, wow. I never really thought about all those details before.
Yeah.
I tend to get so focused on, like, the words that I forget about everything else.
And that's perfectly natural.
Right.
But remember, communication is about so much more than just the words we speak.
Yeah.
Our body language, our tone of voice, our facial expressions, they all contribute to how our message is received.
So the mirror technique is like a way to become more aware of those nonverbal cues and make sure they're working in my favor.
Exactly. And here's a pro tip.
Okay.
Record yourself while you're practicing in front of the mirror.
Okay.
That way you can watch it back later and really analyze your delivery.
Yeah.
It might feel a bit cringy at first, but it's a fantastic way to identify areas for improvement.
Okay, I'm willing to embrace the cringe if it means I can rock this presentation.
Yes.
So mirror practice and recording. For section 1, what about the next section where I talk about topic of second section?
For that section, how about we tap into the power of conversation creation?
Okay.
Remember that improv technique we talked about earlier?
Yeah, where I basically have a conversation with myself.
Yes.
I'm still not sure how that's going to help me prepare for a real presentation.
Think of it this way. When you're presenting, you're essentially having a conversation with your audience.
Okay.
You're sharing information.
Right.
You're engaging with their questions.
Right.
You're responding to their reactions.
Yeah.
The conversation creation technique allows you to practice that conversational flow.
Okay.
And build that spontaneity.
Okay, that makes sense. So how would I apply that to this specific section?
Imagine you're having a casual conversation with a colleague about topic of second section.
Okay.
What kind of questions might they ask?
Yeah.
What kind of points might they raise? What kind of examples would you use to illustrate your points?
That's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah.
So instead of just, like, memorizing a script, I'm trying to anticipate the flow of a natural conversation about this topic. I could even try practicing different responses to different types of questions or challenges.
Exactly. The more you practice these hypothetical conversations,
Yeah.
the more comfortable you'll feel handling the unexpected twists and turns that real conversations often take.
This is starting to feel less like preparing for a presentation
Yeah.
and more like having a series of interesting conversations about a topic I care about.
Right.
That's a much more appealing mental frame.
And that's the key.
Right.
When you approach language learning with curiosity and a sense of play,
Uh-huh.
it becomes less of a chore and more of an adventure.
Okay, so I've got mere practice,
Mm-hmm.
recording, conversation creation.
Yep.
What other tools can we pull out for the remaining sections of my presentation?
Well, you mentioned that you want to sound natural and fluent.
Mm-hmm.
For that, I think shadowing could be a game changer. Remember how we talked about mimicking the rhythm and intonation of native speakers?
Yeah, the whole learn by osmosis thing.
Right.
But how can I use shadowing to prepare for a specific presentation?
Find a video or audio clip of someone speaking about a similar topic to your presentation.
Okay.
It could be a TED Talk, a podcast interview,
Yep.
or even a scene from a movie.
Right, right.
Listen intently to how they structure their sentences, how they emphasize certain words, how they use pauses for effect,
Yeah.
then try to shadow their speech,
Yeah.
mimicking not just their words, but their delivery style.
So it's like I'm borrowing their fluency
Mm-hmm.
and incorporating it into my own speaking style.
Exactly. It's a subtle but powerful way to elevate your speaking and make it sound more natural and engaging.
Okay, I'm adding shadowing to my practice plan. But there's one more thing I'm worried about.
Okay.
I have a tendency to, get nervous
Yeah.
and stumble over my words when I'm speaking in front of a crowd.
Right.
Are there any techniques that can help me calm those nerves and, speak more confidently?
Absolutely. Remember those tongue twisters we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
They're not just fun and challenging.
Yes.
They can also be a great way to warm up your vocal cords and build confidence.
Seriously,
Yeah.
tongue twisters as a confidence booster.
Yes.
How does that work?
By practicing those tricky phrases, you're essentially training your mouth to move smoothly and effortlessly.
Okay.
It's like a pregame stretch for your tongue
Right.
when you're up on stage. Knowing that you can handle those complex sounds can give you a sense of assurance and help you relax into the flow of your presentation.
Okay, I'm willing to give it a try. Do you have a favorite tongue twister that you recommend?
How about this one? Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. A peck of pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked. It's a classic for a reason.
All right, challenge accepted.
Oh,
Peter Piper picked. Okay, I can already feel my cheeks getting a workout.
yes.
But hey, if it helps me calm my nerves and sound more confident, I'm all for it.
That's the spirit. And remember, practice makes progress.
Yeah.
The more you practice these techniques,
Mm-hmm.
the more comfortable and confident you'll feel speaking English, whether it's in a presentation, a casual conversation, or even just talking to yourself in the grocery store.
You've given me so many practical tips and a whole new way of thinking about language learning.
Good.
I'm feeling much more prepared for this presentation.
Awesome.
And honestly, I'm even a little bit excited about it now.
That's fantastic to hear. And remember, this is just the beginning of your English-speaking journey.
Yeah.
The more you embrace those moments of challenge and step outside of your comfort zone, the more you'll grow and discover the joy of fluency.
This deep dive has been amazing.
Thank you.
I feel like I've gained so much valuable insight and practical advice.
Good, I'm glad.
And to all our listeners out there, remember, the key to unlocking fluency is consistency and a willingness to embrace the journey.
I agree.
So keep practicing, keep exploring, and keep having fun with the language.
Yes, have fun.
And that's it for our deep dive today. We'll see you next time.